because this is part of the nature of all the human beings. You know, we can start this question by, is this anger or the ghazab that Allah has created within us, is this good or bad? We cannot answer it in that way. We cannot say ghazab is good or bad. It all depends on how you exercise the ghazab. It is the time and the place and the circumstances. If you do it in the right way, you know, and this is where we have to realize that when we talk about the issue of ghazab, this is part of the nature that Allah has created within us. It is this natural element where we respond to threats and we stand and defend ourselves, our life. Whenever we, sense danger, we would stand up to defend ourselves, our loved ones, our honor, our property, our life. And this is common between animals as well as humans. Even if you try to, harm the babies of an animal, the mother will jump on you. Even if it's not, you are not even trying to harm. If they perceive that to be a danger, even that animal will jump on you. And so it's part of the nature that Allah has created in the animals as well as among the human beings. And everything depends on the level of anger. Basically, from the Islamic point of view, when we look at ilm akhlaq, in modern times we can always say this is Islamic psychology. That's more fancier word probably. People will pay attention more rather than if we say this is what Islamic akhlaq says. But if we say Islamic psychology, it's one and the same thing. If you look at the element of ghazab and anger, there are three dimensions of that. One is the excessive level of ghazab. And this is where a person gets out of control. He is not in control of his own emotions. Rather, he becomes Abdul Ghadab, the slave of his emotions. And this is to be shunned as far as Islam is concerned. The opposite of that would be total suppression of ghadab, where there is total deficiency. Even when it is a demand, the situation demands you stand up for your rights, to defend yourself, your life, your property, your loved ones, and you don't do it, it is not said that, oh, he's a good person. It means you're a coward. So that's the other extreme. What Islam says is that the test actually is to maintain ghadab on the level of moderation. We have to look at the time and the situation and see whether is this the time that I have to become angry, or is this the time which demands that I should restrain my anger. Quran, doesn't talk about the issue of totally restraining, totally, suppressing anger. It talks about al-kadhimin al-ghayz, who restrain, control it. In our hadith, and this is from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, Imam actually describes the ghazab as a fire which is within us. And then the Imam gave a very good example. He said, if we say, there is a fire within you, you will say, what does it mean? I don't see any fire. And Imam said, well, look at a stone. There is fire in it, but you wouldn't see it. Only when you take two stones and rub against one another, means when there is friction, you see the sparks. That's where you come to realize there is fire in there. And this is where Imam is saying that, when it comes to the human beings, they also have this energy within themselves in the form of fire. And this is what is known as ghazab. And this is, and Imam says, it actually reflects. You can look at a person who is angry. Look at the way the color of his face changes. They look at his eyes and even the veins. And this is where, we are told by modern psychology that the blood pressure goes up. heartbeats go up. This is another way of saying the same thing which our Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam had said. So ghadab is not a bad thing, provided it is used in moderation. Provided we are able to control it and restrain it. And this is actually a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us to see whether we give in to ghazab or do we control the ghazab and only exercise it whenever the demand is for it. And this is what we have to realize, that Quran, when it says al-kadhimin al-ghayz, doesn't say al-faqidin al-ghayz. Faqidin al-ghayz means those who don't have ghazab at all. No, that's not a virtue. The virtue is when you have this element of anger. You even have the ability to inflict harm on the opponent, but still you look at the situation and you say, well, this time I will take the higher grounds and restrain myself. And that's where Islam talks about the concept of al-kadhimin al-ghayz. When we talk about the issue of ghadab, especially in family life, and it's not just between the siblings or the parents and children, even and more importantly between husband and wife. And when I say between husband and wife, I'm not only talking about men. Allah did not create ghazab only for men, it is also for women. Women also can become equally angry and out of control when it comes to the issue of ghadab. So it's a problem on both sides of the gender. And this is where we have to look at it. When we talk about Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam, the way he was able to control this element of ghazab is really a powerful example that we have. When Islam talks about the issue of managing the anger, this is such a practical problem, common problem, that modern psychology now has a term for it: anger management course. MashaAllah. You're going to pay for it. Huh? Look at the Islamic sources. Whatever you are taught there is already there. Maybe the words are different, but it shows that this problem is common in the society. People have to go through the process of dealing with this issue of how to manage their ghadab and their anger. So it's not something only on the level of theory. From the Islamic perspective, we are told, for example, if you look at the modern ways of how to deal with the issue of anger, how to manage it, on a short-term basis, they will say, take the steps to lower your heartbeat and your blood pressure. Bring it down. Become calm. From the Islamic point of view, what do you do for it? On a short-term basis, the hadith say to us, number one, as soon as you feel you are becoming angry, stop for a moment and utter the words, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. As soon as you say that, immediately, this rush towards anger and ghazab will stop, because now you are saying, oh Allah, I seek refuge with you from the shaitan. It is shaitan who is trying to, push me to the extreme. And then we are told in the hadith, especially from the sixth Imam, if you are standing at that time when you are angry or you feel you are becoming angry, sit down. But if the situation is so worse that you are sitting down and you become angry, then the hadith says, lie down. Go to a lower level. Go down on the floor and maybe you will calm down. And then we are told, go and drink cold water. And therefore you'll see many times when there are problems, people become angry, others will rush and get a glass of water, have drink of water. This is based on the sunnah of the Ahlul Bayt. Drink cold water, you'll calm down. And if that doesn't work, go and do sunnat wuzu. Go and do wuzu, and if that doesn't even work, go and do sunnat ghusl. That's not in the hadith, but I'm just extending that. If it doesn't work on that level, then you go to the level of ghusl. And so there are all these different methods. One which is very interesting is about those who are related by blood to one another. Where Imam says if there are problems and you become angry, stop yourself, think for a moment, this is my Zabir Rahim. He is related to me. Imam says, go and hug him. Maybe that relationship of blood will calm you down. And so there are different methods that Imam have talked about, that a human being might be put in a situation where they become angry. But they have to restrain. Al-Kadhimin al-Ghayz is one of the virtues of Muttaqeen, the righteous people. And these are very practical, simple methods where you can use in order to control and restrain your anger right away. Salawat. On a long-term basis, if a person is suffering from the problem of ghazab, what we are told in the hadith is, number one, reflect on this whole philosophy of life. Remember, this is part of arrogance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Al-Kibriya'u Ridai. Greatness or to be, great, that's my Abba. Don't put it on. It's only for me. I don't believe in any sharik who can be, as great as me. Number one, we are told, and this is based on the ahadith of the Ma'asumeen, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when you find yourself in a situation that you become very angry, Allah says, remember, at that moment, if you restrain your anger, I promise I will restrain my anger against you on the day of Qiyamah. Allah says that's a deal. Restrain your anger. At that moment, I will restrain my anger against your misdeeds on the day of Qiyamah. And so when we start thinking about these issues, it would help us. Especially when we look at the issue of the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, compared to ourselves, we are nothing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was so merciful. He ignored so many things. Even when you look at the situation of Fir'aun, there's a famous narration where we are told that Musa alayhi salam said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now he's claiming to be the great Lord. Now what? You don't need me, just eliminate him. And what was the answer? That, oh Musa, look at the top of the gate of his palace. It still says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Just a simple gesture of that type, Allah says, I'll restrain my anger. Maybe I'll deal with you on the day of Qiyamah. And this is what we have to realize, that yes, we can become angry, we can have ghadab, but the test is to restrain and control our ghadab. Salawat. We basically have to see how we can, connect to the issue of namaz itself on a long-term basis to restrain this issue of ghazab. The more we go down, when we go to ruku, then we go to sajda, when we confess that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is azim in ruku, and He is the a'la in sajda, then this issue of showing arrogance would be no more there. And so we can even use the spirit of salat in order to learn how to control our anger and our ghazab. Salawat. You see, we can't get rid of people. And we can't even avoid situations where people might make us angry. It's not that easy way out. Because we live in a community. We are part of a family. You can't say, I don't like my brother is, always irritating me, so I'll replace and change. You can't change your brother. You don't have a choice there. Yes, in case of husband and wife, you can do that, but that's not the way. That things don't work, well, that's imtihan by itself. You have to deal with it. And so the way out is not to avoid the people or to get rid of people. The way out is to control our own, sense of anger. That we can do. That we can do by ourselves. Once we get this question many times, who is the strongest man on this earth? Or who is the most courageous person? Is it the person who can, lift the most heavy item? Or somebody, who becomes the world champion in boxing and wrestling? Is he the strongest person in this dunya? No. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam once was passing by a group which was involved in wrestling. So he stopped for a moment and says, what's going on? What is this fellow doing? Everybody is paying attention on him. And the Prophet was told that this person, anybody who challenges him, he defeats that person in wrestling. He is the strongest. And that's where Rasulullah says, أَفَلَا أَدُلُّكُمْ عَلَى مَنْ هُوَ أَشَدُّ مِنْهُ. Should I tell you who is more stronger than this person? He didn't wait for their answer. رَجُلٌ كَلَّمُهُ رَجُلٌ فَكَضِبَ غَيْظُهُ فَغَلَبَهُ وَغَلَبَ شَيْطَانُهُ. A stronger person than this man, who is the champion of wrestling among you, the Prophet says, is a person whom other person irritates him, says things which makes him angry, but this person is able to restrain his anger. He is able to restrain his anger and overcome his inner shaitan. That person is ashaddu minhu, stronger than this champion of the wrestling. Salawat. There is a statement from Amir al-Mu'minin Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. In the same theme where he says, Aqwa nas, the strongest of person, man qawa ala ghadabihi bihilmihi, the person who can overcome his anger by his forbearance. So when we talk about the issue of aqwa or ashad or ashja', some of the ahadith that we have from the Prophet, it refers to the most courageous person, the most strongest person is somebody who can restrain his own anger. And so that's the sign of virtue. When you look at Abbas bin Ali, and all of you are familiar with his life, just think about the purpose why Amir al-Mu'minin married al-Baneen. And I'm sure when he was growing up, he was being reminded again and again that Amir al-Mu'minin had this wish of having children from a lady who comes from a courageous tribe of Kilabiyya, so that those sons would be able to help Hussein at his time of need. Somebody who has been raised in that way. Mentally, he's been prepared for the day when Hussein will need him, when Hussein will need his courage. Somebody who was trained in martial arts by none other than Amir al-Mu'minin himself. But look at his life. What happens on the day of Ashura? Everybody went there to fight. But what was the mission given to Abbas? Not to go and fight. The mission given to him was to try and get water for the children. And that's where we have to realize that he, at every stage of his life, was totally obedient to the Imam of his time. He never allowed his anger and ghadab to take over, even in the most difficult circumstances. For us, Abbas bin Ali actually is the prime example of the ayat which is there in Surah Al-Fath, ayat number 29, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Muhammadun Rasulullah walladhina ma'ahu, salawat, that Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, walladhina ma'ahu, and those who are with him, those who are his true followers, not just at that time. The description of Rasul and his true followers is Ashidda'u ala al-kuffar wa ruhama'u baynahum. Ashidda, plural of Shadid. Ruhama is plural of Rahim. These are opposites. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing two opposites in one place. He says the Prophet and his true followers, on one hand, when they deal with the enemies, they are Shadid, very firm. But when they are among themselves, then they are Rahim, they are very kind and merciful towards one another. How does that happen? Normally we see, people are either just angry all the time. Whenever you see, क्या हुआ भाई? चेहरे पर सिर्फ गुस्सा ही है. अच्छी बात भी कहनी है तो वो भी गुस्से में हो रही है. Whenever you see anything comes out from the mouth is all bitter. And so, people have their different kind of disposition in their nature. But this is where we have to realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us different emotions, and we have to control them and use it according to the time and space and the demand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has from us in different situations. This is where we see that Rasul and his true followers could be Shadid on one hand, could become Rahim on the other hand. It depends on the situation. They don't have to be Shadid all the time. They don't have to be Rahim all the time. And that's actually the imtihan and the test and trial of this dunya. When we look at the example of Abbas bin Ali, yes, the enemies knew his shiddat. They knew his courage. They knew his anger in that way, that they did not even dare challenge him. He goes all the way to the stream of Al-Qama. Nobody stood there in his way. They were afraid of him. So his courage was there, shuja'at was there on that level. Of course, it's a different issue that now Umar ibn Sa'd gives the order that under no circumstances should this water reach to the tents of Hussein. That is where they ambushed him in different ways. But nobody dare face Abbas bin Ali face to face directly. And so his shiddat was there. But on the other hand, you look at the attitude of the children who were in that caravan of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. All of them loved him. It was not only Sakina. He was the beloved uncle of Sakina, but he was loved by all the children. And this is where we see that, he can deal with the enemies in one way, and when it comes to the issue of, interacting with children, it's a different way. And this is where you see the element of Shadid and Rahim, Shiddat and Rahmat in the personality of the one and the same person, Hazrat Abbas bin Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. Although Allama Iqbal didn't use this ayat as a background of this, the words of poetry he has, but let me just borrow the words where he uses the word abrasion, and fawlad, silk and steel. Silk is very soft. Steel is a very, hard metal. And he uses this example. He says that a true mu'min, when he is there in the battlefield facing the enemies, he is steadfast like a steel. Nobody can move him from his position. But when he interacts with his own people, he becomes so soft. It is like the softness of the silk. And so this is shiddat and rahmat coming on the same side. And this is where we have to realize that when we talk about the issue of ghazab, the way of controlling the emotion, we have this special attachment to Hazrat Abbas. And if we are suffering from that problem, always seek his wasita, look at his example. When Shimr comes in on the eve of Ashura from Kufa, look at the response Abbas gives to him. First of all, he didn't want to see him, but Imam said, it's related to your mother's tribe. He's calling you. He wants to go at least listen to what he has to say. And Abbas goes there. And Shimr says, I have this security for you from Ibn Ziyad, for the safety of you and your 3 full brothers. Leave Hussein and come on our side. The response of Abbas is very important. There he doesn't talk about, Hussein bin Ali as a brother. He says to Shimr that, may la'nat be on you and your, guarantee and security paper that you brought for me. You had this sense of getting this for me while this son of the daughter of Rasulullah has no security in your eyes? This is how he's looking at himself, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Hussein is the Imam of the time. He's not only his brother. And that's where you have to see that when it comes to the enemies, yes, you use shiddat, but when it comes to even children, you deal with them in a way that they consider you to be their beloved. Salawat. छठे इमाम ने जनाब अब्बास के ज़ियारत में जो अनावीन इस्तेमाल किए हैं वो अजीब गरीब है, जहाँ एक मासूम इमाम फरमाते हैं अशहदु लक कि अब्बास हम गवाही देते हैं बित्तस्लीम यानी submission to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, वत्तस्दीक़ यानी आपने हक़ को दिल से माना है, वल वफा वफादारी और लॉयल्टी, वन नसीहा सिंसियरिटी, टोटल इखलास के साथ आपने हुसैन का साथ दिया है। लिखल्फ़ नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, उसके बाद फरमाते हैं अस्सलामु अलैका। इससे बेहतर ताबीर जनाब अब्बास की शख्सियत के लिए नहीं है। अस्सलामु अलैका अय्युहल अब्दुस सालिह, सलाम आप पर हो जो खुदावंद आलम के नेक बंदे थे। इंसान या तो अपने शहवत और गज़ब का बंदा होता है या खुदा का बंदा होता है, और उरूज मोमिन का वही है कि वो खुदा का बंदा बने। और यहाँ पर हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि छठे इमाम फरमा रहे हैं जनाब अब्बास के लिए अल अब्दुस सालिह, खुदा के नेक बंदे थे। अमली तौर पे इसकी दलील क्या है? अल मुती' लिल्लाह वली रसूलिही वली अमीरुल मोमिनीन वल हसन वल हुसैन, इन्होंने इताअत की है, अल्लाह की इताअत की है, रसूल की इताअत की है, अली की इताअत की है, हसन की इताअत की है और हुसैन की इताअत की है। हमें इनके सामने सर झुकाना है, हमें इनके सामने तस्लीम होना है, और इसी मानों में हम सही मानों में खुदावंद आलम के नेक बंदे बनेंगे। और इंसान जब उस लेवल पे पहुंचता है तो खुदावंद आलम उसको अपने जैसा बना देता है। हदीस कुदसी में है अब्दी अतिअनी अब अजअलुका मिस्ली, क्या है मेरे बंदे मेरी इताअत कर, 100% इताअत कर। اگر 100% ہماری اطاعت کرو گے تو ہم تجھے اپنا جیسا بنا دیں گے. البتہ کوئی خدا نہیں بن سکتا ہے، لیکن خدا اگر چاہے ٹوٹل اطاعت کے مقابلے میں خدا یہ ڈیل کر رہا ہے کہ ہم تمہیں وہ اختیارات دیں گے جو دوسرے کو نہیں ملتے ہیں. جناب عباس کو باب الحوائج کیوں کہتے ہیں؟ ان کی درگاہ میں اور ان کے واسطے سے لوگوں کے حاجات قبول ہوتی ہیں. کیوں؟ اس لیے کہ جناب عباس نے ٹوٹلی اپنے تمام ایموشنز اور جذبات کو تابع کر دیا تھا امام وقت کے. جہاں جہاں حسین کا حکم چلا ہے وہیں عباس نے اس کے مطابق عمل کیا ہے، اس کے غیر اور کوئی بات نہیں ہوئی ہے. اور چونکہ ٹوٹلی اطاعت سے کام لیا ہے، لہٰذا خداوند عالم نے بھی ان کی شہادت میں وہ درجہ دیا ہے کہ چوتھے امام کے مطابق خود شہداء کے مراتب بہت ہی بلند ہیں، لیکن قیامت کے دن دوسرے شہداء حضرت عباس کے منزلت کو دیکھیں گے، سٹیٹس کو دیکھیں گے، اور ان میں وہ فیلنگ ہوگی انویس، ان میں وہ غبطہ کا احساس ہوگا کہ کاش مجھے بھی یہ مرتبہ ملا ہوتا، انکلوڈنگ وہ جو شہداء کربلا تھے. یہ اس لیے ہے کہ عباس نے مکمل طور پہ اپنے تمام جذبات، چاہے وہ غضب کا معاملہ ہو، شہوت کا معاملہ ہو، خواہشات کی بات ہو، اپنی مرضیوں کی بات ہو، سب کچھ تابع کر دیا تھا مرضی ابا عبداللہ الحسین کی. اور اسی میں ہمارے لیے اسوہ اور مثال ہے جناب عباس کی کہ اگر ہم لوگ ان کے نام کو لے کے ان کے علم کے سائے میں سمبولک سینس میں آگے بڑھیں اور اطاعت کو اپنائیں تو یقیناً خداوند عالم ہمیں بھی وہ بلند درجات دے سکتے ہیں کہ جو خداوند عالم نے اپنے خاص بندوں کے لیے مخصوص رکھا ہے. خداوند اس قلیل بات قبول فرما، ہمارے گناہوں کو بخش دے، ہمارے توفیقات میں اضافہ فرما، امام کے ظہور میں تعجیل فرما. ربنا تقبل منا انک انت السمیع العلیم.
افضل السلام اور محمد و آل محمد. حل کیجئے مشکل میری اب دیر ستم ہے، عباس علی تم کو سکینہ کی قسم ہے. حل کیجئے مشکل میری اب دیر ستم ہے، عباس علی تم کو سکینہ کی قسم ہے. افضل السلام بر محمد و آل محمد. Again, let's recite a loud salawat on this auspicious occasion of the wiladat of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. Salwa ala Nabi. Before I call upon Ali Raza Bhai Rajani to introduce you to a very important guest tonight, a few announcements. Ladies will hold Ladies Amal after the 15 Shaaban common program. Inshallah, Amals shall begin right after the regular Amals. And Namaz Jafar Tayyar Namaz to be led by Nargis Bhai Karim, followed by Ziyarat Jamia led by Sister Jamila Devji. And they will end the program, ladies will end the program with Sehri. Also, Ramazan Darsa online registration will be launched on 5th of Shaaban for both boys and girls for ages 3 to 17 years. Please register by 20th Shaaban, that is 10th of July, for easier transition into the classes. Please check the Jamaat announcement for the registration link. Also, Naushad and Rehana Molidina, together with Munir and Tarannum Nasser, request the pleasure of your company to grace the nikah ceremony of their children Imran to Zara, inshallah, on Sunday, July 1st, that is this Sunday, July 1st, at 2:15 p.m. Program will be followed by Walima dinner. Also, Mahmoud and Shaida Barwani, together with Muhammad and Firoza by Somji, request the pleasure of your company to grace the nikah ceremony of the children. Zainul to Fatima, inshallah, on Saturday, July the 14th at 2:30 p.m., followed by Walima dinner. Jazakallah. The last announcement I had is for the ladies. They are invited to celebrate all the 3 wiladats at the complex this Friday, June the 29th at 4:30 p.m. Also, volunteers have requested for you to please proceed towards the Imam Barga after the program for the serving of Fatiha. Ali Raza Bhai Rajani, please.
Auzubillahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Maulana Syed, my elders, brothers and sisters, and beloved children, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On this very happy occasion of the birth anniversary of Abul Fazl al-Abbas alayhi salam,